Hi, I'm Zara Hartwell, and 3 months ago, my own family branded me a failure in front of an entire restaurant full of strangers. What they didn't know was that the owner was listening to every word. What happened next changed everything. And now they're the ones begging me to remember them when I succeed. Some betrayals cut so deep they carve out space for miracles you never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain drummed against the windows of Il Giardino as I smoothed down my dress one last time before walking through those heavy glass doors. The restaurant was everything I'd imagined from the photos: elegant exposed brick walls lined with vintage wine bottles, soft amber lighting casting golden shadows across white tablecloths, and the gentle hum of conversation mixing with classical music. I'd been looking forward to this dinner for weeks, thinking maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. My family had chosen this place specifically because it was expensive, prestigious, the kind of establishment where Portland's elite gathered to see and be seen. Dad had made the reservation months in advance, claiming he wanted to celebrate my recent certification from culinary school. For once, I let myself believe they were proud of me. I spotted them immediately at the corner table, the one with the perfect view of the restaurant's bustling open kitchen. Mom was already nursing her second glass of wine, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the stem as she surveyed the room like a queen holding court. Dad sat straight-backed in his tailored suit, checking his phone intermittently, while Bianca commanded attention even while sitting still. She wore a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than my rent, her honey blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. As I approached, I caught the tail end of their conversation. "The lighting in here is absolutely divine," Bianca was saying, already angling her phone for what would undoubtedly become content for her wellness empire. "I should do a post about mindful dining experiences." "Zara, there you are," Mom said without warmth, not bothering to stand as I reached the table. "We've already ordered wine. I hope you don't mind." I slid into the empty chair, feeling immediately out of place in my simple black dress next to Bianca's obvious luxury. "That's fine. This place is beautiful. It should be, considering what we're paying," Dad muttered, finally looking up from his phone. "Though I suppose money well spent if it makes for a proper celebration." The word celebration hung in the air with a weight that made my stomach clench. I'd learned to read the subtle signs in my family's voices, the way they could make any word sound like a weapon wrapped in silk. "So," Bianca said, setting down her phone and fixing me with that practiced smile she used in all her social media videos, "tell us about this cooking thing you've been doing. Mom says you finished some kind of program." "I graduated from the Portland Culinary Institute," I said, trying to keep the pride out of my voice. "I specialized in Italian cuisine. Actually, I've been working at Mama Rosa's downtown and the head chef says I have real potential." "Potential," Mom repeated, swirling her wine. "That's a nice way of saying you're not quite there yet." The server appeared beside our table, a young woman with kind eyes and an eager smile. "Good evening, folks. I'm Claire, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Have you had a chance to look at the menu?" "We're still deciding," Dad said dismissively. "Give us a few more minutes." After Claire left, the conversation resumed with that particular brand of passive aggression my family had perfected over the years. They talked around me rather than to me, discussing Bianca's latest business ventures, her upcoming collaboration with a major wellness brand, the vacation home they were considering in Cabo. "The influencer market is so saturated now," Bianca was saying, "but I've found my niche. People really connect with authenticity, you know? Real stories, real struggles. That's what sets me apart from all the fake wellness gurus out there." The irony wasn't lost on me. Bianca had never struggled for anything in her life, but she'd built an entire brand around overcoming adversity that existed only in carefully crafted captions and staged photos. "Speaking of real stories," Dad said, turning his attention to me with the kind of calculated look that meant trouble, "we need to talk about your situation, Zara." My hand stilled on my water glass. "This cooking hobby of yours," Mom said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she was about to deliver what she considered tough love. "It's been what, 2 years now?" And you're still working at that little hole-in-the-wall place, making what? Minimum wage? I'm learning, I said quietly. Building experience. The restaurant industry takes time. Time, Dad repeated. You're 26 years old, Zara. Your sister had already launched her business by the time she was your age. She's building something real. Something sustainable. This fantasy of yours about becoming some kind of chef, it's not realistic. The words hit, like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to cut the deepest. I glanced around the restaurant, suddenly hyper-aware of the other diners, the way conversations seemed to pause at nearby table. We weren't being quiet anymore. I'm not living in a fantasy, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm following my passion. I'm good at this. Are you? Mom asked, leaning forward. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're wasting your life on pipe dreams. You could have gone into business, gotten a real job, contributed something meaningful to society. Instead, you're playing with food like you're still 5 years old. Bianca reached across the table and patted my hand in what might have looked like sisterly support to anyone watching. We're just worried about you, Zara. I mean, look at this place. She gestured around us. This is real success. This is what happens when you build something that matters. The owner of this restaurant, he's an entrepreneur, he's created jobs, contributed to the community. That's the kind of impact you could have if you'd just stop being so stubborn. I'm not being stubborn, I said, but my voice cracked slightly. I'm trying to build something too. Building what? Dad's voice carried now, drawing glances from other tables. You're 26, and you don't even have your own apartment. You're living in that studio above the bookstore like some kind of starving artist. When are you going to grow up and face reality? The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too warm. I could feel eyes on us, curious stares from other diners, who were probably wondering what family drama was unfolding at table 12. The elegant atmosphere that had felt so welcoming moments earlier now felt like a spotlight, illuminating my humiliation for everyone to see. I am facing reality, I said, my voice stronger now despite the tremor in my hands. My reality, not the one you want me to live, your reality. Mom laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you about reality, sweetheart. Reality is that you're a failure. You failed at every single thing you've ever tried to do. You failed at college. You failed at that marketing job we got you. And now you're failing at this ridiculous cooking obsession. The word failure hung in the air like a slap. I felt the blood drain from my face, felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill over. Around us, conversations had definitely stopped. I could feel the weight of strangers' attention, their pity and curiosity, mixing into a cocktail of second-hand embarrassment. But something strange happened in that moment. Instead of crumbling, instead of apologizing and begging for their forgiveness like I always did, I felt something else entirely. A strange, almost ethereal calm washed over me. The tears that had been building simply evaporated, replaced by a clarity I'd never experienced before. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. She was afraid of me, afraid of what I might become if I stopped seeking their approval. They all were. So I smiled. Not a fake smile, not the placating expression I usually wore when they cut me down to size, a real smile, genuine and peaceful, and completely unexpected. I smiled because I finally understood something fundamental about my family, about myself, about this whole carefully orchestrated dinner. You know what? I said, my voice steady and clear. You're absolutely right. They blinked, clearly not expecting this response. Dad's eyebrows furrowed. Mom's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Bianca's influencer smile faltered for just a moment. I am a failure, I continued, still smiling. I failed at living the life you wanted me to live. I failed at becoming the person you thought I should, and I've never been more grateful for any failure in my entire life. I stood up slowly, deliberately, placing my napkin on the table with careful precision, because failing at being who you wanted me to be means I succeeded at being who I actually am. The silence at our table was deafening, but I was aware of something else now, a presence behind me, someone who had been listening. I turned slightly and saw him, a distinguished man in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, wearing a crisp white shirt and black apron. He was watching our table with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Enjoy your dinner," I said to my family, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet section of the restaurant. "I hope it's everything you deserve." I walked toward the exit with steady steps, my head held high, that strange smile still playing at my lips. As I passed the man in the apron, our eyes met for just a moment. He nodded slightly, a gesture so small it might have been my imagination, but something in his expression made me think he understood exactly what had just happened. The cool Portland air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My phone was already buzzing in my purse, undoubtedly texts from my family demanding explanations, apologies, the usual emotional cleanup they expected after their performances, but I didn't check it. Instead, I walked slowly down the rain-slicked street, my smile growing wider with each step. I didn't know it yet, but the man in the apron was Vincent Rossini, the owner of Il Giardino. I didn't know that he'd been standing there listening for the last 5 minutes of our conversation, or that he'd been in the restaurant industry for 30 years, and had developed a sixth sense for recognizing real talent when he saw it. I didn't know that he'd been watching me work at Mama Rosa's for months, had been planning to approach me about a position at his restaurant, or that my family's public humiliation had just given him the perfect opportunity to change my life. All I knew was that I'd finally stopped apologizing for being myself, and something told me that was just the beginning. The studio apartment above Henderson's used books had never felt more like home than it did that night. I climbed the narrow stairs to my small space, kicked off my heels, and stood in the middle of my tiny kitchen, looking around at the life I'd built for myself. It wasn't much by my family's standards, but it was mine. Every chipped plate, every mismatched piece of furniture, every cookbook stacked on the counter represented a choice I'd made for myself. I made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. The events of the evening played back in my mind, but instead of the usual shame and self-doubt, I felt something entirely different: relief, liberation, like I'd been holding my breath for 26 years, and had finally been given permission to exhale. My phone buzzed again, then again. I glanced at the screen, and saw a string of messages from Bianca, each one more frantic than the last. "Where did you go? You can't just walk out like that. Mom is upset. Dad wants to talk. You're being dramatic. Call me back." I turned the phone face down on the counter and went back to my tea. For the first time in my life, their emotional emergency wasn't my responsibility to fix. Their discomfort wasn't my problem to solve. I'd spent so many years trying to earn their love, their approval, their basic respect, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without their validation. The rain continued to fall, creating a gentle rhythm against the windows that matched the steady beating of my heart. I thought about Vincent Rossini, about the way he'd looked at me in that moment of recognition. There had been something in his eyes, a kind of understanding that went deeper than sympathy. It was the look of someone who had seen real passion, real talent, and recognized it despite the circumstances. I finished my tea, and prepared for bed, but sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept replaying the evening, but now I was noticing details I'd missed in the moment. The way other diners had watched our table, some with disapproval at my family's behavior, others with what looked like admiration for my calm response. The way the servers had glanced at each other when my mother raised her voice. The way Vincent Rossini had nodded at me, like he was acknowledging something important. When I finally drifted off to sleep, I dreamed of kitchens filled with the sound of sizzling garlic and fresh herbs, of creating dishes that made people close their eyes in pleasure, of building something beautiful and meaningful with my own hands. I dreamed of a life where my passion was respected, where my skills were valued, where I didn't have to apologize for being exactly who I was meant to be. I woke up the next morning with sunlight streaming through my windows and a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Something had shifted the night before, Some fundamental change in the way I saw myself and my place in the world. I'd stopped being a supporting character in my family's story and started being the protagonist in my own. Little did I know that Vincent Rossini had already made his decision, and my phone was about to ring with an opportunity that would change everything. The call came at exactly 9:37 the next morning. I was standing in my tiny kitchen, still in my pajamas, stirring cream into my coffee when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer it anyway. "Is this Zara Hartwell?" The voice was warm, slightly accented, unmistakably confident. "Yes, this is Zara. This is Vincent Rossini. From Il Giardino. I believe we had a brief encounter last evening." My coffee cup nearly slipped from my hands. Vincent Rossini, the owner of the restaurant, where my family had publicly dismantled me. Heat flooded my cheeks as I remembered the scene. The way his eyes had met mine as I walked out. "Mr. Rossini," I managed, setting my cup down carefully. "I'm so sorry about what happened last night. My family and we shouldn't have caused such a disturbance in your restaurant." "You have nothing to apologize for, Miss Hartwell. Nothing at all." His voice carried a warmth that surprised me. "In fact, I'm calling because I was impressed by your composure under difficult circumstances, and because I've been watching your work at Mama Rosa's for the past few months." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "You've been watching my work. I make it my business to know the talented cooks in this city. Giuseppe speaks very highly of your skills, and I've had the pleasure of tasting several dishes you've prepared when I've dined there. Your risotto ai funghi porcini was exceptional." I sank into my single kitchen chair, overwhelmed. Giuseppe, the head chef at Mama Rosa's, had been sending my food to Vincent Rossini, and he'd been impressed enough to notice, to remember to seek me out. "I have a proposition for you," Vincent continued. "I'm opening a second location of Il Giardino, focusing on more intimate dining experiences. I need a sous chef who understands both technique and heart, someone who cooks with passion, not just precision. Would you be interested in discussing this opportunity?" The question hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to someone drowned. After years of scraping by, of working double shifts at Mama Rosa's for barely above minimum wage, of having my dreams dismissed as childish fantasies, someone was offering me a real chance. Not just a job, but a career. Not just employment, but recognition. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I would be very interested." "Excellent. Can you meet me at the original Il Giardino this afternoon, say 3 o'clock? We can discuss the details over coffee." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time staring at my phone. The morning light streaming through my windows seemed brighter somehow, filled with possibility. I thought about the previous night, about the way my family had tried to crush my spirit, and how their cruelty had somehow led directly to this moment. There was poetry in it, a kind of cosmic justice that made me smile despite myself. I spent the morning in a state of nervous excitement, trying on different outfits, practicing what I might say, researching everything I could find about Vincent Rossini and his restaurant. He was a legend in Portland's culinary scene, a James Beard Award winner who had built his reputation on innovative Italian cuisine and impeccable service. To work for him would be a dream come true. At exactly 3 o'clock, I walked back into Il Giardino. The restaurant looked different in the afternoon light, more intimate somehow, with soft jazz playing in the background and the lunch crowd beginning to thin out. Vincent was waiting at a corner table, dressed casually in dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt, but his presence still commanded attention. "Dara," he said, standing to greet me. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." As we settled into our seats, he poured coffee from a silver pot, and studied me with those same kind eyes I remembered from the night before. "I want to be direct with you," he said. "What I witnessed last night was unacceptable. No one should have to endure that kind of treatment, especially not from family." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. They're not usually quite so public about their disappointment in me. "Their disappointment says nothing about you and everything about them," Vincent said firmly. "I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've learned to recognize talent when I see it. More importantly, I've learned to recognize character. The way you handled yourself last night showed both grace and strength." He leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious. "The new restaurant will be called Nana's Table. It's going to be smaller, more personal, 12 tables, a chef's counter, an open kitchen where diners can watch the magic happen. I want it to feel like you're eating in someone's home, someone who happens to be an extraordinary cook." My heart raced as he described his vision. It sounded like everything I'd ever dreamed of. The kind of place where food became an experience, where every dish told a story. The sous chef position would mean long hours, high pressure, and constant learning, he continued. But it would also mean creative input, the chance to develop your own dishes, and a salary that would allow you to live comfortably while pursuing your passion. "Are you interested?" "More than interested," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This sounds like exactly what I've been working toward." Vincent smiled, and for the first time since I'd sat down, I felt myself relax. "There's something else," he said. "I believe in investing in my people. If you accept this position, I'll also arrange for you to stage at some of the best restaurants in the country. You'll spend time in New York, San Francisco, maybe even Italy. You'll learn from the masters. Bring that knowledge back to Portland." I stared at him speechless. Stage work, training with renowned chefs, travel to Italy. These were opportunities I'd only dreamed about, experiences I'd assumed were reserved for culinary school graduates, with wealthy families and connections. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "There must be dozens of more qualified candidates." "Qualified on paper perhaps," Vincent said, "but cooking isn't just about technique, it's about passion, about the ability to create something that nourishes not just the body, but the soul. I've tasted your food, Zara. I've seen the love you put into every dish. That's not something you can teach." We spent the next hour discussing details, salary expectations, start dates, and the vision for Nana's Table. Vincent was generous with both his time and his insights, treating me not as a potential employee, but as a future partner in bringing his dream to life. As we prepared to leave, he handed me a business card. "Think about it over the weekend," he said, "but I hope you'll say yes. I think we could create something truly special together." I walked home in a daze, clutching the business card like a talisman. The contrast between this conversation and the one from the night before was so stark it felt surreal. In the span of 18 hours, I'd gone from being called a failure by my own family to being offered the opportunity of a lifetime by one of the city's most respected chefs. That evening, I called Giuseppe at Mama Rosa's to tell him about the offer. His reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Zara, this is incredible," he said, his Italian accent thick with excitement. "Vincent Rossini, he is the best. You learn from him, you become the best too. You must say yes." "But I'll be leaving you short-staffed," I said, suddenly worried about abandoning the man who had given me my first real chance in a professional kitchen. "Don't you worry about that," Giuseppe said warmly. "This is what I hoped for you. This is why I told Vincent about your cooking. You have the talent. Now you get the opportunity. You make me proud." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness I'd encountered. Giuseppe had been quietly advocating for me. Vincent had noticed my work and character, and now I was being offered a chance to build the career I'd always wanted. It was a sharp contrast to the constant criticism and dismissal I'd experienced from my family. My phone buzzed with a text from Bianca. "Mom wants to know if you're coming to Sunday dinner. She's making your favorite roast." I stared at the message for a long time. Sunday dinner had been a family tradition for as long as I could remember. A weekly gathering where we'd sit around the dining room table and maintain the pretense of being a loving family. Mom would cook an elaborate meal, Dad would hold court about his latest business ventures, and Bianca would regale us with stories from her successful wellness brand. I would sit quietly, grateful for any scraps of attention, apologizing for existing, but something had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the same person who had walked into Il Giardino the night before. The woman who had smiled calmly while being called a failure was discovering her own worth, her own power.
I typed back a simple response, I have other plans. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in my stomach. For a moment, I considered not answering, but old habits die hard. Zara, what do you mean you have other plans? Mom's voice was sharp with disapproval. We're family. Sunday dinner is important. I'm sure you'll manage without me, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Don't be ridiculous. You're being dramatic about last night. Your father and I were just trying to help you see reality. We love you, but sometimes tough love is necessary. There it was again. That familiar pattern. The cruelty disguised as concern, the emotional manipulation wrapped in claims of love, but I could see it clearly now, could recognize it for what it was. Mom, I said quietly, do you remember when I was 12 and won the school cooking competition? There was a pause. What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember what you said when I came home with the ribbon? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't recall the specifics. You said it was nice, but I shouldn't let it go to my head. That cooking wasn't a real skill, not something I could build a life on. You threw the ribbon in the junk drawer, and I never saw it again. Zara, you're being overly sensitive. That was years ago. It was the beginning of a pattern. Every time I showed passion for something, every time I succeeded at something, you found a way to diminish it, to make sure I knew it wasn't important, wasn't worthy of celebration. That's not true. We've always supported you. No, I said, my voice growing strong.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You've always supported the version of me that you wanted to exist, the one who would quietly accept whatever life you thought I deserved. But that's not who I am. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her scrambling for the right words to regain control of the conversation. We can talk about this at dinner on Sunday, she said finally. Family disagreements should be handled within the family. I won't be there, I said. I'm done pretending we're something we're not. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding but my hands steady. The apartment felt bigger somehow, like I'd cleared out years of accumulated emotional clutter, simply by refusing to participate in the familiar dance. Over the weekend, I found myself thinking about the patterns that had shaped my life. The way my achievements had always been minimized, my dreams dismissed as impractical, my worth measured against impossible standards. I thought about all the times I'd apologized for wanting more, for daring to believe I could build something meaningful. But I also thought about Giuseppe's pride in my work, about Vincent's recognition of my talent, about the opportunity that lay before me. These people saw something in me that my family had either missed or chosen to ignore. They saw potential where my family saw failure. On Sunday evening, as I was reviewing the menu concepts Vincent had shared with me, my phone buzzed with a series of texts from Bianca, photos from the family dinner I'd missed, captions about how much they'd missed me, how empty the table had felt without me. It was a carefully orchestrated guilt campaign, designed to make me feel selfish for prioritizing my own needs. But instead of the usual stab of guilt, I felt something else entirely. Pity. I pitied them for being so invested in maintaining a facade that they couldn't see the real relationships they were destroying. I pitied them for being so threatened by my independence that they had to resort to manipulation and emotional blackmail. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching the restaurants where Vincent had suggested I might stage. I read about innovative techniques, studied menus, imagined myself working alongside some of the world's best chefs. I was building a future, not dwelling on a past that had never truly valued me. Monday morning, I called Vincent and accepted his offer. The joy in his voice was immediate and infectious. "Welcome to the team, Zara," he said. "I think you're going to love what we're building together." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my family's attempt to crush my spirit had actually freed me. Their cruelty had been the catalyst I needed to stop seeking their approval and start building my own life. They'd called me a failure, but they'd inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, the motivation to prove them wrong, not for their sake, but for my own. I was finally ready to stop apologizing for being exactly who I was meant to be. And that was just the beginning of discovering what I was truly capable of achieving. 3 weeks into my new position at Nana's table, I was finally hitting my stride. The kitchen hummed with organized chaos, the kind of beautiful madness that happens when a team works in perfect synchronization. Vincent had been right about the intimate atmosphere. With only 12 tables, every dish that left our kitchen felt personal, crafted with intention rather than rushed through an assembly line. I was in the middle of plating a delicate butternut squash ravioli when my phone buzzed on the shelf above the prep station. Vincent had a strict no-phone policy during service, but this was the soft opening period, and we were still fine-tuning our system. I glanced at the screen and saw Bianca's name, followed by a text that made my blood run cold. Emergency. Dad's in the hospital. Heart attack. Please come. My hands stilled on the plate. Despite everything that had happened, despite the hurt and the manipulation and the years of dismissal, the word emergency cut through all of that like a knife. Family was family, even when they were terrible at being family. Vincent, I called out, stepping away from the pass, I need to leave. Family. Emergency. He looked up from the risotto he was stirring, saw the expression on my face and nodded immediately. Go. We'll handle service. Take care of your family. I drove to the hospital in a haze of conflicting emotions. Part of me was genuinely worried about Dad, scared of losing him despite everything. But another part, a smaller, more cynical voice, wondered if this was another manipulation, another way to pull me back into their orbit now that I'd started to break free. The intensive care unit smelled like disinfectant and fear. I found Mom and Bianca in the waiting room, both looking genuinely distraught. Mom's usually perfect makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. Bianca was pacing, her phone clutched in her hand but for once not recording anything. Zara, Mom said, standing up as I approached. Thank God you're here. He's stable, but it was touch and go for a while. They're running more tests. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Whatever our issues, I didn't want to lose my father. What happened? He collapsed at the office, Bianca said, her voice shaky. His assistant called 911. The doctors say it was a massive heart attack, but they caught it in time. He's going to need surgery, probably bypass. We sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs, the three of us united in our worry despite everything else. For a few hours it almost felt like we were a real family again, the kind that rallied together during crisis instead of creating them. When the surgeon finally came out to speak with us, the news was cautiously optimistic. Dad was stable, the surgery had gone well, but he would need weeks of recovery and significant lifestyle changes. As we listened to the medical details, I found myself automatically slipping back into the old patterns, the ones where I absorbed everyone else's stress and made it my responsibility to fix things. He's going to need help when he comes home, Mom said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Someone to make sure he eats properly, takes his medications, doesn't overexert himself. I can rearrange my schedule, Bianca offered, but her tone suggested she was hoping someone else would volunteer first. I'll take some time off, I heard myself saying. I can cook for him, make sure he's following the cardiac diet the doctors recommend. Mom's face lit up with relief. Oh, Zara, that would be wonderful. You know how your father is about his food. He'll actually eat if you're the one cooking. It felt good to be needed, to be the solution instead of the problem. After years of being treated as an inconvenience, the gratitude in Mom's voice was intoxicating. I found myself agreeing to move back home temporarily, to put my new job on hold while Dad recovered. Vincent was understanding when I called to explain the situation. Family comes first, he said. Take the time you need. Your position will be here when you're ready to come back. Moving back into my childhood home felt like stepping into a time machine. My old room had been converted into Mom's craft space, so I ended up sleeping on the fold-out couch in the den, surrounded by the same family photos that had always made me feel like an afterthought. But I threw myself into the role of caregiver with the same dedication I'd brought to the kitchen. I researched cardiac nutrition, planned heart-healthy meals, and spent hours in the kitchen preparing foods that would aid Dad's recovery. I made herb-crusted salmon with quinoa, vegetable-packed soups and grain bowls that were both nutritious and delicious. For the first time in years, my family was eating my cooking every day, and they were grateful for it. "This is incredible," Dad said one evening, savoring a bowl of my Mediterranean chickpea stew. "I had no idea healthy food could taste this good." "Zara's always been talented in the kitchen," Mom said, and I felt a flutter of pride at the acknowledgement. Maybe this whole cooking thing isn't as impractical as we thought. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from either of them, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Maybe this crisis would be the catalyst for real change in our family dynamic. Maybe they would finally see me as more than a disappointment. Bianca was around more during Dad's recovery, and for the first time in years we actually spent time together without constant tension. She helped me shop for ingredients, listened as I explained different cooking techniques, and even asked me to teach her how to make some of the dishes I'd been preparing. "You really are gifted at this," she said one afternoon, as we worked together in the kitchen. "I'm sorry I never took it seriously before." "It's okay," I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "I'm just glad Dad's getting better." "He is, thanks to you," she said. "We all are. Having you here taking care of everything. It's been such a relief. I don't know what we would have done without you." The words felt like balm on old wounds. This was what I'd always wanted: to be valued, to be seen as essential rather than expendable. I found myself extending my planned stay, telling Vincent I needed just a few more weeks to make sure Dad was fully stable. But as the weeks stretched on, I began to notice subtle changes in the way my family interacted with me. The initial gratitude was still there, but it was starting to feel less like appreciation and more like expectation. Dad began making requests for specific dishes, not as a grateful patient, but as someone who was used to being catered to. Mom started asking me to take on more household responsibilities, reasoning that since I was already home, I might as well help with the grocery shopping, the laundry, the endless list of domestic tasks that kept a house running. "Since you're such a good cook," she said one morning, "maybe you could handle the meal prep for Dad's golf buddies when they come over this weekend. Nothing fancy, just some of those little appetizers you make." "I'm not a caterer, Mom," I said, but I was already mentally planning the menu. "Of course not, honey. It's just that you're so good at this, and it would mean so much to your father to be able to host his friends again." It was a small request, reasonable even, but it felt like the beginning of something I recognized, a pattern I'd seen before. The way my talents were acknowledged only when they could be useful, the way my worth was measured by what I could provide rather than who I was. Bianca started involving me in her content creation, asking me to cook photogenic meals for her wellness brand. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, setting up her ring light in the kitchen. "My followers love authentic family content, and you're such a natural in the kitchen." I watched as she filmed herself cooking the dishes I'd already prepared, narrating the process as if she were the one creating them. She was careful never to claim she'd made them herself, but the implication was clear. Her followers saw her in the kitchen, surrounded by beautiful food, and drew their own conclusions. "This is my sister's incredible cooking," she would say, gesturing at the camera. "She's been taking such amazing care of our family during Dad's recovery. Isn't it beautiful how food can heal?" The comments poured in, praising Bianca for her family values, her dedication, her obvious talent in the kitchen. She screenshotted the most flattering responses and sent them to me with heart emojis, as if their praise of her was somehow a compliment to me as well. I began to feel like I was disappearing again, becoming invisible in the same way I always had. My cooking was being celebrated, but I wasn't. My care for Dad was being acknowledged, but only as it reflected well on the family as a whole. I was useful, valuable even, but only as long as I remained in the background. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I overheard Mom and Bianca talking in the living room. They didn't know I was listening, didn't realize how sound carried from the kitchen. "She's been so helpful," Mom was saying. "I almost forgot how much easier things are when she's around." "She seems happy," Bianca replied. "Happier than she was when she was doing that restaurant thing. Maybe this is better for her, you know? Being needed at home instead of chasing impossible dreams." "That job was never going to last anyway," Mom said. You know how she is. She gets these ideas about herself, these grand plans, but she's not really cut out for that kind of pressure. She's much better suited to taking care of family. I stood frozen at the sink, my hands still sudsy from the dishes I'd been washing. They were doing it again, reshaping my choices to fit their narrative. I hadn't chosen to give up my job. I'd taken a temporary leave to help during a crisis. But in their minds, I'd already failed at the restaurant, already proven that I was better suited to domestic life than professional ambition. Maybe we should encourage her to stay, Bianca continued. Dad's going to need ongoing care, and she's so good at this. It would be selfish of her to leave him now, especially when he's doing so well under her care. The words hit me like a physical blow. I realized with crystal clarity that this was the trap I'd walked into. They weren't grateful for my help. They were planning to make it permanent. They'd found a way to bring me back into their orbit, to make me essential in a way that kept me small and contained. I finished the dishes in silence, my mind racing. Dad was doing well, better than anyone had expected. His doctors were pleased with his progress, and he was already talking about returning to work part-time. He didn't need round-the-clock care anymore, but my family was invested in maintaining the fiction that he did. That night, I lay on the fold-out couch staring at the ceiling, thinking about the trajectory of my life. 6 weeks ago, I'd been building something meaningful, working toward a future that excited me. Now I was back where I'd started, cooking for a family that took my efforts for granted, and planning my life around their needs instead of my own dreams. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Hope your father is doing well. Missing you in the kitchen. Table 7 asked specifically for your butternut squash ravioli tonight. The new cook is good, but she's not you. I stared at the message, feeling a pang of longing so sharp it was almost physical. I missed the kitchen, missed the adrenaline of service, missed being part of something larger than myself. I missed being valued for my skills rather than my willingness to sacrifice my ambitions for others' comfort. But how could I leave now? Dad was still recovering, still needed support. Mom was clearly struggling with the stress of his illness, and Bianca, despite her success, seemed to need me around in ways she couldn't articulate. I was the glue that held this family together, the one who made sure everyone else was taken care of. The next morning, I woke up to find Bianca already in the kitchen, setting up her camera equipment. She'd laid out ingredients for what looked like a complex breakfast spread, far more elaborate than anything Dad's diet actually required. Morning, sunshine, she said cheerfully. I'm doing a live cooking segment for my wellness challenge. Could you help me with the timing? I want to make sure everything comes together perfectly for the camera. I watched as she arranged the ingredients artfully, each item positioned for maximum visual impact. This wasn't about cooking for Dad or taking care of the family. This was about content creation, about maintaining her brand image as the perfect daughter who could do everything. What exactly are you making? I asked. Oh, just some of those breakfast bowls you've been preparing for Dad. My followers are always asking for healthy breakfast ideas, and these are so photogenic. She started the live stream, greeting her audience with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who'd built a career on manufactured authenticity. Good morning, beautiful soul. Today I'm cooking for my family, making sure Dad gets the nutrition he needs for his recovery. Cooking with love is the best medicine, don't you think? I watched from the sidelines as she attempted to recreate the breakfast bowls I'd perfected over weeks of trial and error. She stumbled through the process, clearly unfamiliar with the techniques, but her audience didn't seem to notice. They were too busy praising her dedication, her family values, her obvious culinary talent. This is so much more fulfilling than eating out, she said to the camera, gesturing at the slightly burnt quinoa she'd just plated. There's something so grounding about nourishing your family with your own hands. The irony was almost unbearable. She was being celebrated for work I'd done, for care I'd provided, for skills I'd developed, but she was the one receiving the praise, building her brand on the foundation of my invisible labor. When the live stream ended, she turned to me with a satisfied smile. That went so well. My engagement is through the roof. People really connect with authentic family content. Authentic, I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. You know what I mean, she said, already reviewing the comments on her phone. Real life, real family, Real love. That's what people crave these days. I looked at the kitchen, at the mess she'd made while creating content, at the perfectly plated breakfast bowl that would go cold while she responded to comments and scheduled follow-up posts. There was nothing authentic about any of it. But the real revelation came later that evening, when I received a text from my friend Marcus, who worked at a competing restaurant downtown. "Saw your sister's cooking video," he wrote. "Weird that she's taking credit for your signature dishes." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "The breakfast bowl from this morning. That's the same recipe you made for the staff meal last month, right? Same plating style, same garnish." She's calling it her own creation. I opened Bianca's Instagram account and scrolled through her recent posts. There it was, the breakfast bowl recipe, presented as her own original creation. "Family recipe for healing," the caption read. "Sometimes the best medicine comes from the heart." The comments were full of praise for her creativity, her culinary skills, her devotion to family. Food bloggers were asking for the recipe. Wellness influencers were sharing her content. She was building her brand on my work, profiting from my labor, while I remained invisible. I screenshotted the post and sent it to Marcus. "This is my recipe," I wrote. "I developed it specifically for Dad's cardiac diet." His response was immediate. "That's plagiarism, you should call her out." But I knew I wouldn't. Calling out Bianca would create family drama, would make me the villain in their story. It would be seen as jealousy, as petty competition between sisters. I would be the one causing problems, disrupting the family harmony that depended on my silence. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I swallowed my anger, rationalized her behavior, and found ways to make myself smaller so that others could appear larger. I was trapped in a pattern that felt as familiar as breathing, as comfortable as it was suffocating. But something had shifted inside me during those weeks away from the restaurant. I'd tasted freedom, felt what it was like to be valued for my skills rather than my willingness to sacrifice. I'd experienced the satisfaction of building something meaningful, of being part of a team that respected my contributions. As I lay in bed that night, I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay trapped in this comfortable prison, forever serving others while my own dreams withered away. Or I could risk everything by choosing myself, by valuing my own future over my family's immediate comfort. The decision was harder than it should have been, but for the first time in my life, I knew what I had to do. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late October. I was standing in the kitchen at 6 a.m., preparing Dad's breakfast and meal prep for the rest of the week, when I heard Bianca's voice drifting from the living room. She was on a video call with what sounded like a business partner, her tone animated and confident. "The family cooking content has been absolutely explosive," she was saying. "My engagement rates have tripled since I started featuring authentic home cooking. Brands are reaching out left and right, wanting to partner with me." I paused in my chopping, straining to hear more. "The secret is authenticity," Bianca continued. "People can smell fake content from a mile away, but when you're actually cooking for your family, when there's real love, and real stakes involved, that comes through in every frame. My audience knows this isn't just performance, it's real life." Real life, I almost laughed at the irony. There was nothing real about Bianca's cooking content, except for the food I prepared, and the recipes I'd spent years perfecting. She was building an empire on my foundation while I remained invisible in my own family's narrative. But what she said next made my blood freeze entirely. "Actually, I'm launching a cookbook next spring. Nourishing Family, Recipes for Healing and Connection. My publisher is really excited about it. We're positioning it as wellness meets comfort food, cooking as an act of love and healing." A cookbook. She was writing a cookbook featuring my recipes, my techniques, my years of learning and experimentation. I thought about all the dishes I'd created specifically for Dad's recovery, the careful balance of nutrition and flavor I'd achieved through trial and error. She was going to profit from all of it, while I continued to live on her family's charity. I set down my knife carefully, my hands trembling with a rage so pure it felt almost cleansing. This wasn't just exploitation anymore, this was theft, plain and simple. She was stealing my life's work and repackaging it as her own creative genius. I quietly pulled out my phone and began recording her conversation. I wasn't sure what I would do with the audio,
but some instinct told me I needed evidence of her true intentions. The advance is substantial, she was saying, and my agent thinks we can probably sell it to Netflix for a cooking show adaptation. Imagine the reach we'll have then. I could really make a difference in people's lives, help them understand that cooking isn't just about food, it's about creating connection. Creating connection. The words felt like acid in my ears. The only connection Bianca was creating was between her brand and my stolen work. I finished preparing breakfast mechanically, my mind racing with possibility. For weeks I'd been allowing myself to be used, telling myself it was temporary, that I was helping my family through a crisis. But Dad was healthy now, stronger than he'd been in years. The crisis was over, but they'd found a way to make my servitude permanent. When Bianca emerged from her call, she found me sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee, staring at my phone. "Morning, sis," she said brightly. "You're up early. Did you make Dad's oatmeal already?" "It's in the fridge," I said without looking up, "along with his lunch and dinner." "You're the best," she said, pouring herself coffee from the pot I'd made. "I don't know what we'd do without you." I looked up at her then, really looked at her. Even first thing in the morning, she was camera ready, her hair in artfully tousled waves, her skin glowing with expensive skincare products. She moved through the kitchen like she owned it, sampling the food I'd prepared, rearranging items for better lighting in case she decided to film content later. "Bianca," I said quietly, "I heard your call this morning." She froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "What call?" "The one about your cookbook deal. Nourishing family, recipes for healing and connection." Her face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, guilt, defensiveness, and finally that practiced innocence she'd perfected over the year. "Oh, that," she said with a laugh that sounded forced. "It's just a business opportunity. You know how these things work in my industry." "Actually, I don't," I said, standing up slowly. "Explain it to me. Explain how you're writing a cookbook when you couldn't boil water without burning it 6 months ago." "That's not fair," she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "I've been learning. You've been teaching me, teaching you to steal my recipes." "They're family recipes," she said quickly. "We grew up in the same house, ate the same food. These aren't your personal property." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo I'd recorded. Her own voice filled the kitchen, confident and scheming. "The secret is authenticity. People can smell fake content from a mile away." The color drained from her face. "You recorded me. I recorded you admitting that your entire brand is built on lies." I said, "That cookbook you're so excited about, every single recipe in it, will be something I created. Every technique you demonstrate, will be something I taught you. Every story about nourishing family, will be about work I did while you filmed yourself taking credit for it." "You're being dramatic," she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "It's not like that." "Then how is it, Bianca?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been systematically stealing my work for months, while I've been too grateful for scraps of family affection to notice." She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My brand, my followers, they expect content constantly.
I have bills to pay, contracts to fulfill." "So do I," I said. "Or I did, before I gave up my career to take care of Dad." "You didn't give up anything," she snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. "You were playing dress-up in some kitchen, pretending to be a real chef. This is better for you. This is what you're actually good at: taking care of people, supporting the family. Not everyone is cut out for the spotlight." There it was, the truth she'd been hiding behind months of false gratitude and sisterly bonding. I wasn't a chef in her mind. I wasn't even a person with my own dreams and ambitions. I was a support system, and visible foundation on which she could build her visible success. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of this kitchen. Get out of this house. And when you publish that cookbook, you better hope I never see my recipes in it." "You can't kick me out," she said, her voice rising. "This is my family's house too. Then let's go ask Mom and Dad what they think about your little business venture," I said, moving toward the living room. "Wait," she said, grabbing my arm. "You don't understand. The contracts are already signed. The publisher has already paid the advance. I can't just cancel now. That sounds like a you problem. It would destroy my career, she said. And for the first time, I heard real fear in her voice. Everything I've built, gone. My followers, my partnerships, my income, I'd lose everything. I looked at her hand on my arm, at the desperation in her eyes, and felt nothing. No sympathy, no familial obligation, no urge to fix her problems like I always had before. She'd made her choices, built her success on stolen foundation, and now she was facing the consequences. You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from your own sister, I said, pulling my arm free. I walked to my room and began packing my things. It didn't take long. I'd been living out of a suitcase for months, never quite settling in, because some part of me had always known this arrangement was temporary. As I folded my clothes, I could hear Bianca in the kitchen, making frantic phone calls, trying to manage the crisis I'd just created in her perfect life. When I emerged with my bags, I found Mom and Dad in the living room, both looking confused and concerned. Bianca had clearly filled them in on the situation, though I suspected her version of events differed significantly from reality. "Zara, honey," Mom said, standing up as I entered. "Bianca says you're upset about her cookbook. I'm sure we can work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I said. "I'm going back to my real job. My real life. Dad's healthy. He doesn't need a full-time caregiver anymore. But we need you," Dad said, and there was genuine emotion in his voice. "These past few months, having you here, it's been like having our family back together." "We were never together," I said gently. "We were just in the same house." "That's not true," Mom protested. "We're family. We love you. You love what I provide," I correct. "You love having someone to cook your meals and manage your household, and make your other daughter look good on social media. But you don't love me. You don't even see me." "How can you say that?" Dad asked. "After everything we've done for you. What have you done for me?" I asked. "Really think about it. In the past 3 months, what have you given me, other than the opportunity to sacrifice my own life for your comfort?" The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken truths and unacknowledged resentments. They couldn't answer because there was no answer. They'd taken and taken and taken, justified it as family obligation, and never once considered what I might be giving up in return. "Your sister made a mistake," Mom said finally. "But we can fix this. We're family." "Bianca didn't make a mistake," I said. "She made a calculated decision to steal my work and profit from it, and you enabled her by creating an environment where my contributions are invisible and my dreams are disposable." I picked up my bags and headed for the door. Behind me I could hear them scrambling, trying to find the right words to pull me back into their orbit, but I'd finally seen the pattern clearly, understood the game they'd been playing with my life, and I was done being a player in. "Zara, wait," Bianca called out, chasing me onto the front porch. "We can share credit on the cookbook. I'll put your name on it too." I turned to look at her. This person, who shared my DNA but had never truly known me. "It's not about credit, Bianca. It's about respect, and you've never respected me enough to see me as anything other than a resource to be exploited." "That's not true," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then prove it," I said. "Cancel the cookbook. Admit to your followers that you've been taking credit for someone else's work. Show me that you value our relationship more than your brand." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eye. The cookbook deal, the advance money, the career momentum, the follower count, all of it weighed against the relationship with a sister she'd never truly valued. "I can't," she said finally. "I've worked too hard to throw it all away." "Then we have nothing more to discuss." I drove away from that house feeling lighter than I had in months. Despite the gravity of what I'd just done, I'd blown up my family relationships, eliminated my safety net, chosen uncertainty over the comfortable prison they'd built for me. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was driving towards something instead of running away. My first call was to Vincent. "I'm ready to come back," I said when he answered. "If you'll still have me." "Thank God," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "We've been holding your position, but I was starting to worry you'd decided to stay with your family permanently." No, I said firmly. I'm done putting their needs ahead of my own future. When I walked back into Nana's table that evening, the kitchen staff erupted in cheers. They'd saved a bottle of champagne for my return, and as we shared it after service, I felt like I was rejoining the living. This was my chosen family, the people who valued my contributions and respected my ambitions. But the real battle was just beginning. Over the next few days, my phone exploded with calls and texts from my biological family, each more desperate than the last. They tried guilt, anger, emotional blackmail, promises of change, threats of disownment. I ignored them all. Then Bianca escalated. She posted a heartbreaking video on her social media, tears streaming down her face as she talked about family betrayal and jealousy. She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive sister who couldn't handle her success. The comments poured in, thousands of her followers, offering support and condemning me for abandoning my family during their time of need. Some people can't handle seeing others succeed, she said to the camera, her voice breaking with practiced emotion. It's especially painful when it's your own family. I've tried so hard to include my sister in my success, to share opportunities with her, but jealousy is a poison that destroys everything it touches. The video went viral. My name was dragged through the comments sections of multiple platforms, strangers calling me selfish and ungrateful based on Bianca's carefully crafted narrative. Food bloggers who had praised her content began speculating about family drama. The story took on a life of its own, growing more distorted with each retelling. But I had something Bianca didn't expect. Allies. Marcus, my friend from the restaurant scene, had been documenting the similarities between Bianca's content and my actual cooking for weeks. He reached out to other chefs who knew my work, compiled evidence of the recipe theft, and began building a case for what he called culinary plagiarism. This is bigger than just your family drama, he told me over coffee. She's representing herself as a professional chef to publishers and brands. That's fraud. And every chef in this city knows those recipes are yours. The professional culinary community began to speak up. Giuseppe from Mama Rosa's posted a video testimonial about my skills and creativity. Vincent wrote a detailed LinkedIn post about my contributions to his restaurants. Other chefs shared stories about my work, my innovation, my dedication to the craft. But the real game changer came from an unexpected source. Kai, the paralegal who had helped me with legal advice months earlier, reached out after seeing the social media drama unfold. I've been following this situation, they said. Your sister just signed a publishing deal based on stolen intellectual property. That's actionable. And if she's using your recipes in a commercial venture without permission, that's copyright infringement. I hadn't realized that my original recipes could be protected, that the months of development and refinement I'd put into them had legal value. But Kai explained that intellectual property theft was a serious matter, especially when it involved commercial gain. We can file a cease and desist order, they said, force her to either credit you as co-author or cancel the publication entirely. The legal papers were served to Bianca 3 days before her scheduled cookbook photo shoot. The timing was intentional, designed to maximize the pressure at a moment when cancellation would be most costly and embarrassing. Her response was immediate and explosive. She called me screaming, her composure completely shattered. You're destroying my life, she shrieked into the phone. How can you do this to your own sister? I'm protecting my work, I said calmly. The same work you've been stealing for months. I made you famous, she said. Nobody knew who you were before I started featuring your cooking. Exactly, I said. You featured my cooking and took credit for it. That's the problem. The legal pressure worked. Faced with the possibility of lawsuits, damaged reputation, and cancelled contracts, Bianca's publishers demanded proof of her original recipe development. When she couldn't provide it, the cookbook deal evaporated overnight. But the real victory came when Vincent offered me something I'd never expected: a partnership. Not just a job, but an ownership stake in a new restaurant concept he was developing. You've proven you have the talent, the creativity, and the backbone to succeed in this industry, he said. I want you as a partner, not just an employee. The new restaurant would feature my recipes, my vision, my name on the door. Everything Bianca had tried to steal and claim as her own would finally be recognized as mine. When the announcement went public, the culinary community rallied around me in a way that took my breath away. Food and Wine magazine ran a feature about young chefs making their mark. The James Beard Foundation invited me to participate in a Rising Stars showcase. Suddenly, I wasn't just Bianca's invisible sister, I was Zara Hartwell, chef and restaurateur building something meaningful with my own hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. By trying to destroy my dreams, my family had inadvertently given me the motivation to pursue them more aggressively than I ever had before. Their rejection had forced me to find people who truly valued what I had to offer. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that I'd finally stopped asking for permission to exist, stopped apologizing for wanting more than they thought I deserved. I'd chosen myself, and that choice had led to everything I'd ever dreamed of achieving. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of Sage and Stone, my own restaurant, watching the final preparations for opening night. The space was everything I'd dreamed of: warm exposed brick walls, handcrafted wooden tables, an open kitchen where diners could watch the artistry unfold. Every detail reflected my vision, from the locally sourced ingredients to the carefully curated wine list featuring small Oregon vineyards. The morning light streamed through the large windows, illuminating the handwritten menu boards that featured dishes I'd spent months perfecting. Wild mushroom risotto with truffle oil, pan-seared salmon with fennel and citrus reduction, handmade pasta with seasonal vegetables from the farmer's market down the street. Each dish told a story of my journey, my growth, my refusal to remain invisible any longer. Vincent arrived early, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the proud smile of a mentor watching his protege succeed. "Ready for this?" he asked, surveying the dining room with satisfaction. "More than ready," I said, and meant. The nerves were there, the natural anxiety that comes with any major milestone, but underneath was a bedrock of confidence I'd never felt before. This wasn't just a restaurant opening. It was the culmination of finally choosing myself. The staff began arriving for the pre-service meeting. Marcus, who had left his previous position to become my sous chef; Claire, the server from Il Giardino, who had followed me here because she believed in what we were building; a small but dedicated team of people who shared my vision of creating something meaningful through food. As we reviewed the evening's reservations, I noticed a familiar name on the list: Patricia Hartwell, Party of 3, 7:30 reservation. My mother had made a reservation for opening night, bringing what I assumed were Dad and Bianca. I stared at the entry for a long moment, feeling a complex mix of emotions. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, noticing my expression. "Family," I said simply, and he nodded with understanding. The entire kitchen staff knew the story by now, had witnessed my transformation from someone seeking approval to someone commanding respect. "Want me to handle their table personally?" Claire offered. "Make sure everything's perfect." "No," I said, closing the reservation book. "Treat them like any other guests. No special attention, no drama, just good food and professional service." The afternoon flew by in a blur of final preparations, last-minute deliveries, sauce tastings, plate presentations, the 100 small details that would make or break the evening. But as 5 o'clock approached and the first guests began arriving, everything clicked into place with the precision of a well-rehearsed symphony. The early tables were filled with industry friends, local food bloggers, and longtime supporters who had followed my journey. The energy was electric, conversations flowing as freely as the wine, the open kitchen creating an intimate connection between diners and the culinary team. This was exactly what I'd envisioned when I first dreamed of having my own plate. At 7:15, I was plating the signature butternut squash ravioli when Claire appeared beside the pass. "Your family just arrived," she said quietly. "Table 12. I looked through the kitchen's pass-through window and saw them being seated. Mom wore her best dress, the navy blue one she reserved for important occasions. Dad looked healthier than I'd seen him in years, his color good, his posture strong, and Bianca looked smaller somehow, less radiant than usual, her usual confidence dimmed. "How do you want to handle this?" Marcus asked, standing beside me. "We cook,"
I said simply. We do our jobs and let the food speak for itself. I watched as they studied the menu, saw Mom's eyebrows raise as she read the prices, noticed Dad's interested expression as he scanned the wine list. Bianca sat quietly, her phone face down on the table for once, looking around the restaurant with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. When their order came back to the kitchen, I felt a flutter of something that might have been nervousness. They'd ordered thoughtfully, the wild mushroom risotto, the pan-seared salmon, and yes, the butternut squash ravioli that had become my signature dish, the same ravioli Vincent had complimented months ago, the dish that had helped launch my career. I prepared their plates with extra care, not because they were family, but because this felt like a moment of closure. Every element had to be perfect, not to impress them, but to honor the journey that had brought me here. The risotto was creamy and rich, the salmon flaked perfectly, the ravioli pillowy and delicate. Each plate was a testament to the skills I'd developed, the passion I'd refused to abandon. Claire returned to the kitchen an hour later with empty plates and a strange expression. They want to speak with the chef, she said. Your mom asked specifically for you. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked out to the dining room, my heart steady but alert. They looked up as I approached their table, 3 faces wearing expressions I couldn't quite read. Zara, Mom said, standing up slightly. This meal was extraordinary. Thank you, I said simply, my hands clasped behind my back. I had no idea, Dad said, his voice carrying a weight of realization. I mean, we knew you could cook, but this is artistry. I waited for the inevitable request, the attempt to reconcile now that my success was undeniable. The pattern was so familiar. Dismiss my dreams, until they proved profitable, then try to claim credit for supporting me all along. But instead, Mom did something unexpected. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I found this when I was cleaning out the hall closet, she said, handing it to me. I unfolded the paper and felt my breath catch. It was the ribbon from my elementary school cooking competition, the one she'd dismissed and thrown in the junk drawer all those years ago. Someone had written, "First place, Zara Hartwell, age 12" in careful script across the bottom. I kept it, she said quietly. I know I didn't act like it mattered, but I kept it. The gesture was small, perhaps insignificant to anyone else, but to me it represented something profound, an acknowledgement, however late, that my passion had always been real, always been worthy of recognition. The risotto was incredible, Bianca said, speaking for the first time since I'd approached the table. I've never tasted anything like it. Thank you, I said, studying her face. She looked different somehow, less polished, more human. The scandal surrounding her cookbook deal had humbled her in ways I'd never seen before. I owe you an apology, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. What I did, stealing your recipes, taking credit for your work, it was wrong. I was so focused on building my brand, that I forgot what really mattered. I looked at her, this person, who had caused me so much pain, and felt something unexpected, compassion, not forgiveness, not yet, but an understanding that she too had been trapped in patterns that served no one. I know you probably can't forgive me, she said, tears beginning to form in her eyes, but I wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm proud of what you've built here. This success, Dad said, gesturing around the bustling restaurant. You earned that. We didn't help, we didn't support you, but you did it anyway. That takes real strength. I stood there for a moment, absorbing their words. Part of me had dreamed of this moment for years, the validation I'd craved for so long. But now that it was here, I realized something important. I didn't need it anymore. Their approval was nice, but it wasn't necessary for my happiness or success. Thank you for coming tonight, I said finally. And thank you for the apology. It means something. Does this mean? Mom started, hope creeping into her voice. It means we can start fresh, I said carefully, but it doesn't erase the past. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be on equal terms. No more expecting me to sacrifice my dreams for family convenience. No more treating my career as a hobby. We understand, Dad said, and we're willing to earn your trust back. I nodded, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. I should get back to the kitchen, I said. Thank you for coming. As I walked away, I heard Bianca call out softly, Zara. I turned back. I'm proud to be your sister, she said. I should have said that years ago. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of successful service. Every dish that left the kitchen was met with enthusiasm. Every table left satisfied and planning their return visit. The local food critic was among the diners, and I watched her take notes throughout the meal with expressions of genuine pleasure. When the last guest finally left, and the staff finished cleaning, Vincent uncorked the champagne he'd brought earlier. We stood in the empty dining room, exhausted but exhilarated, toasting to a successful launch and an uncertain but promising future. To Zara, Vincent said, raising his glass, who proved that the best revenge is massive success. To chosen family, I replied, looking around at the team who had believed in me when my biological family hadn't, and to never settling for less than we deserve. As I drove home to my new apartment that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of family rejection, the exploitation and manipulation, the legal battles, and public drama, all of it had been necessary to forge me into someone strong enough to claim my own space in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from a producer at the Food Network, asking if I'd be interested in discussing a potential show opportunity. Another message came from a cookbook publisher, inquiring about my availability for a potential project. The success I'd built was opening doors I'd never even thought to knock on, but the message that made me smile came from Aunt Delilah, who had seen photos of the restaurant opening on social media. So proud of you, honey, she wrote. You've become exactly who you were meant to be. I thought about that phrase as I settled into bed in my own space, surrounded by my own things, accountable only to myself and the people I'd chosen to build a life with. Becoming who you were meant to be required more than just following your dream. It required to disappoint people who had different plans for your life. It required choosing your own approval over others' validation. It required building your own table when you realized you'd never truly have a seat at theirs. 3 months later, Sage and Stone was booked solid weeks in advance. The Food Network show was in development, and my cookbook proposal was making rounds with publishers who were genuinely interested in my story and recipe. But more importantly, I was building relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. My biological family had become occasional guests in my life, rather than its central focus. We had dinner together once a month, conversations that were polite but boundary. Bianca had started her own business, a meal kit delivery service that featured other chefs' recipes with proper attribution and compensation. She was learning to build something real instead of stealing someone else's foundation. One evening, as I was reviewing applications for a new line cook position, I found myself thinking about the woman who had walked out of Il Giardino that night, 9 months ago. She had been so desperate for family approval, so convinced that her worth was tied to others' validation. That woman couldn't have imagined the life I was living now. The kitchen door chimed, and Marcus called out that we had a special request from table 7. They want to compliment the chef on the seasonal tasting menu, he said. Apparently, they've never experienced anything like it. I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron, and walking out to meet guests who appreciated what I'd created. This was my life now, building something meaningful, being recognized for my actual contributions, surrounding myself with people who valued both my professional skills and personal worth. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for your fullness. Sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing yourself, even when others call it self. And sometimes, the family that truly sees you is the one you build rather than the one you're born into. I had learned to stop knocking on doors that would never open, and instead built my own entrance into the life I deserve. And on the other side of that door was everything I'd ever dreamed of, and more than I'd ever dared to hope for. Up next, You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.